The storm rolled across the prairie like a warning. Beth Monroe ran until her legs gave out, the hem of her dress heavy with mud, one hand gripping her swollen belly, the other clutching a tattered shawl. She didn't know where she was headed, only that she couldn't go back. Each flash of lightning lit the emptiness around her, miles of open land and no sign of mercy. She whispered a prayer she hadn't said in years, begging the heavens for just one light, one roof, one man kind enough to spare her a corner of it. Then, through the rain, she saw it, a wooden gate, half broken but standing firm. A single word burned into the plank read, "Fields." It was the last thing she saw. The sheer exhaustion of running for miles, the weight of her fear, and the possibility of help made her legs buckle, and she fell unconscious against the muddy wood. Dawn crept slow over the prairie, soft light spilling across a world still heavy from the night's storm. The ground was soaked, the air thick with the scent of wet earth and smoke from a distant fire. Elias Fields stepped out from his cabin, hat in hand, scanning the fence line the way a man does when he's learned not to trust quiet mornings. The rain had washed everything clean, except the loneliness that hung around his land like fog. That's when he saw her. She lay crumpled against the gate, her shawl torn, hair plastered to her face, one arm curled protectively around her belly. Elias knelt beside her, checking for breath. Warm, faint but steady. He frowned, studying the mud-caked dress, the fine stitching beneath the ruin. This wasn't some drifter. She'd come from money once, or something close to it. When her eyes fluttered open, she gasped and tried to sit up. "Easy," he said, voice low. "You're safe enough for now." She blinked, disoriented. I didn't mean to trespass. Please, I just needed a place to rest." Elias stood, glancing toward the house. "You picked a hard night for running." "I'll work," she whispered. "Cook, clean. Whatever you need, just don't send me away." He studied her for a long moment, then finally nodded. "You can stay under my roof," he said, "but you'll earn your keep. I don't run no charity, and I don't keep secrets." Beth Monroe pressed a shaking hand to her stomach and nodded, but she said nothing about the life growing inside her or the man she'd run from. And as the sun broke over the horizon, Elias Fields had no idea that taking her in would change both their lives in the weeks to come. By the time the morning sun had cleared the last of the storm clouds, Beth Monroe had been carried inside. Elias Fields set her on the small bed in the spare room, a space that hadn't been used in years. The scent of cedar and dust filled the air. When she opened her eyes again, the world was quiet, except for the faint creak of the porch boards outside. Elias was standing there, arms folded, watching the horizon like a man who trusted it even less than the people who crossed it. He turned when he heard her stir. "You can sit if you're able," he said evenly. "There's coffee on the stove." "Food, too." Beth tried to rise, wincing as she shifted her weight. "Thank you," she whispered. "I'll repay your kindness, I promise." He poured a cup and set it near her hand. "Kindness is expensive out here," he said. "You can stay, but you'll work for it." "I don't need charity, and I don't give it either." Beth nodded quickly. "I can cook. Clean. I'll do whatever's needed." He looked her over again, mud still clinging to her dress, hands trembling around the cup. "You'll start when you're steady on your feet," he said, then turned for the door. "And if you've got trouble following you, best tell me now." "I don't keep secrets under my roof." Beth's eyes fell to her lap. "No trouble," she lied softly. The truth was a cold iron weight she carried inside her. She was running from a man who believed the law, the child, and every breath she took belonged to him. She prayed the Field's name on the gate was enough to hide her from his reach. That afternoon, Elias stepped back into the house carrying a tin bucket of warm water. The storm left the well clean, he said, setting it by the door. There's a basin in the corner. You can wash up if you'd like. Beth hesitated, her cheeks coloring. You don't have to. He cut her off with a nod toward the hall. Ain't no trouble. There's a dress in that wardrobe. Belonged to my wife. The air shifted. She froze, unsure whether to speak. He went on, voice quieter. She passed some years back. Didn't have no kin to take her things. Beth swallowed hard. I'm sorry. Elias only shrugged. Life's short out here. The dress'll fit well enough. When she finally slipped into the water, she let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. The warmth stung against her cuts, but it felt like being human again. She ran the soft cotton of the borrowed dress through her fingers, simple, clean, and heavy with a kind of grief she didn't yet understand. That evening, the house smelled of cornbread and beans. Beth moved like someone trying to belong, wiping every surface twice, humming songs from a life she had lost. Elias sat by the fire, sharpening his knife, his scar catching the firelight. After a long silence, he asked, You running from a man? Her hand froze mid-stir. Why would you ask that? He stared into the fire. 'Cause I was one once. Took years to stop running. She met his eyes for the first time, saw the loneliness behind the roughness. He looked away first. That night, she couldn't sleep. The wind whispered through the cracks in the walls, and every sound reminded her of hooves in the distance. She rose quietly and went to the small window that faced the front gate. The sign that read Fields swayed gently in the wind. She rested a hand over her belly. We're safe, she whispered, though she wasn't sure she believed it. In the next room, Elias lay awake, staring at the ceiling. He didn't know why he'd let her stay. Maybe because the quiet had lasted too long. Or maybe deep down, he already knew that the stranger sleeping under his roof would soon change everything he thought he knew about peace. Days passed quietly on the Fields ranch. Beth kept busy, scrubbing floors, tending the hens, and learning which boards creaked too loud beneath her feet. Elias worked the pastures, his shadow long against the grass, silent but steady as the wind. They spoke little, but there was a rhythm to the quiet. When he came in from the fields, she had supper waiting. When he needed tools, she laid them out before he asked, two strangers sharing a fragile truce. One evening the sky burned gold with sunset, and Elias found her hanging sheets on the line. The wind caught one, nearly pulling it from her grip. He stepped in close, catching the edge just before it slipped free. Their hands brushed. Her breath faltered. For a moment, the air between them thickened with something neither dared to name. Then he stepped back, voice low. Storm coming again. You best stay inside tonight. She nodded, eyes fixed on the horizon. Seems like the storms don't ever stop out here. That night, thunder rolled again. Beth woke to a sharp pain beneath her ribs, not the baby, but the ache of fear. She pressed a hand to her belly and waited until the wave passed. A soft knock came at the door. Elias's voice carried through. You all right in there? I'm fine, she called back too quickly. He hesitated. You sound hurt. Beth tried to steady her breathing, but when another pain struck, her answer broke into a gasp. The door creaked open, and Elias stepped in, lantern in hand. She was sitting on the floor, pale, clutching her stomach. Don't make me leave, she choked out. Elias knelt beside her, the light catching the scar along his jaw. His voice was softer now, the kind a man uses when he's remembering ghosts. You didn't tell me there was a child. Tears burned in her eyes. Would it have changed your answer? Would you have let me stay? He studied her for a long moment. No, he said, but I would have known what to pray for. He helped her onto the bed, placed a damp cloth across her forehead, and sat by her side until the pain eased. When she finally drifted into sleep, his gaze lingered on the curve of her hand, resting over her belly. In the lantern's glow, the memory came back. His wife's last night, the way her breath faded between contractions, the tiny cry that never came. He'd buried them both before sunrise. He'd sworn never to open that room again. And yet, here she was. Another woman fighting to keep a child alive beneath his roof. The next morning, Beth found a pot of broth waiting by the fire. Elias was already outside, mending a fence that didn't need fixing. When she thanked him later, he only said, "Every man deserves a second chance to do right." But as she turned away, he added quietly, "And so does every woman." Weeks turned into a kind of peace neither of them had planned for. Beth's strength returned, her cheeks filling with color again. She cooked, cleaned, and sometimes sang softly while hanging laundry in the sun. The sound startled Elias the first time. He hadn't heard music in his house since before the scar. He pretended not to notice, but he found himself walking slower when she sang. Every other Saturday, Elias rode into town for supplies. The first time he took Beth along, heads turned. Abilene was the kind of place that noticed everything and forgave nothing. Women paused on porches, pretending to dust railings while their eyes followed the couple. Men tipped their hats to Elias, but too slow, too cautious. Inside the mercantile, Beth lingered near the bolts of fabric. A young clerk offered a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Didn't figure you for the domestic type, Mr. Fields," he said. Elias didn't flinch. "Didn't figure you for a fool," he replied, steady as a whip crack. The room went still for a moment before the clerk mumbled something about restocking and disappeared into the back. Beth looked down, embarrassed. Elias placed a tin of coffee and a small folded blanket on the counter. "Wrap these separate," he said. "They're for the lady." The old shopkeeper's wife raised an eyebrow, but said nothing. Her gaze lingered, though long enough for Beth to feel the weight of it. Outside, Beth asked softly, "You shouldn't have done that." "Done what?" "Call me the lady. Folks'll talk." "They already are," he said, tightening the rope on his saddle. "Might as well give them something worth talking about." For a moment, neither spoke. Then Beth smiled, small and genuine. It was the first time he had seen her smile that way. By late summer, the rumors had found a life of their own. The widow across the creek said Elias was keeping a woman under his roof. The preacher's wife said there was a child coming, and not a proper ring between them. When Beth went to fetch water at the town well, conversations would stop mid-sentence. She learned to lower her eyes, to move quickly, to carry her dignity like armor. But the whispers followed her all the same. One afternoon, the doctor's wife stopped her near the feed store. Beth Monroe, isn't it?" she asked, her tone polite but tight. Beth froze. "You must be mistaken." "No," the woman said, voice softening but eyes sharp. "I remember you from Wichita. You worked for Samuel Dyer, didn't you?" The name hit like a cold wind. Beth forced a smile. For a short while. Before things changed, the woman's eyes flicked to Beth's stomach, then to Elias waiting by the wagon. She offered a thin, knowing smile. "Well," she said, "things have a way of following a body, don't they?" That night, Beth sat on the porch steps, staring out at the empty road. Elias came to stand beside her, a mug of coffee in his hand. "Folks saying something ugly again?" he asked. She nodded. "It's getting worse." He looked toward the horizon. "You can't live by what folks say." "They don't know your truth." Beth's voice trembled. "But they might know his." Elias turned then, studying her face. "His?" Her eyes filled, but she held his gaze. "The man I ran from. Samuel Dyer. He'll find me eventually. He always does." Elias set the mug down and rested a hand on the porch rail, knuckles white. "Let him come," he said quietly. "I've been waiting for a fight worth winning." The prairie was still when the trouble finally came. A hot wind blew in from the south, the kind that carries dust and bad news. Beth had been shelling peas by the porch, humming softly to the baby turning inside her, when she heard it. Distant hooves, too many to be a ranch hand's return. Elias stepped out from the barn, wiping sweat from his brow. He didn't need to ask. He could read the warning in her eyes. "Inside," he said quietly. She froze. "It's him, isn't it?" Elias didn't answer. He just handed her his revolver. "Lock the door." "Keep low." The riders came fast, 4 of them. At their head rode Samuel Dyer, tall in the saddle, coat too fine for the dirt road beneath him, the kind of man who believed the world owed him obedience. He reined in hard at the gate, the same gate where Elias had found her months before. He smiled when he saw the name burned into the wood. "Fields," he read aloud, "fitting place for thieves." Elias walked forward, slow and steady, his hand resting on the rifle slung over his shoulder. "You're a long way from where you come from, Mr. Dyer," he said. "Ain't much for you here." Dyer's grin sharpened. "There's one thing, actually. A woman who belongs to me." "She don't belong to no man," Elias said. Beth watched from the window, her heart pounding. The men behind Dyer shifted in their saddles, restless, hands near their guns. Dyer leaned forward. "You think you can hide her?" "I bought her fair, same as I'd buy cattle. I got papers saying so." Elias's jaw tightened. "You got paper, I got land. Out here, mine counts for more." For a long moment, neither man moved. Then Dyer's eyes narrowed. "You'd risk your life for her? For some man's bastard?" Elias raised the rifle just enough to make his answer clear. "I've risked my life for less." The first shot cracked the silence. Dust jumped at Elias's feet. He fired back, the sound echoing through the valley. One of Dyer's men tumbled from his horse. The others scattered for cover. Beth screamed, ducking low behind the table, arms around her stomach. Elias moved toward the porch, calm and deliberate, firing once, twice, driving the riders back toward the open road. Dyer snarled and wheeled his horse closer. "You'll hang for this, Fields!" "You think you can take what's mine?" Elias's reply came like steel. "Ain't taking what's yours, protecting what's right." Dyer fired as he turned to flee. The bullet grazed Elias's shoulder, spinning him half around. He dropped to one knee, pain searing through muscle and bone, but he steadied himself, raised his rifle again, and squeezed the trigger. The shot struck Dyer's arm, tearing through his coat. The man shouted in pain, clutching the wound. "You'll regret this," he hissed in agony. Elias stood firm, bleeding, voice steady. "Not today." Dyer spurred his horse and fled, his men scrambling after him, the kind of retreat that carried more pride than victory. When the dust finally settled, the yard fell silent. Beth burst through the door, rushing to Elias's side. Blood seeped through his shirt, staining her hands as she pressed them to the wound. "You could have been killed," she cried. He turned to her, the weight of everything in his eyes. "Maybe, but I ain't the one who almost lost everything." Beth pressed a shaking hand to his chest, feeling the heartbeat beneath the grit and sweat. "You didn't have to save me," she whispered. Elias met her gaze. "I wasn't saving you," he said quietly. "I was saving what's right." The first light of dawn crept across the prairie as the doctor's wagon rattled up the trail. Elias sat slumped on the porch, his shirt torn and blood drying dark across his shoulder. He tried to wave the doctor off, but the man wasn't having it. "Save your pride, Fields," the doctor muttered. "You're lucky that shot didn't go deeper." Beth hovered nearby, her hands clasped tight. She'd sent for the doctor herself, ignoring Elias's protests. Watching him pale and sweating through the pain had been more than she could stand. The doctor worked in silence, stitching the wound as the morning sun burned off the last of the fog. When he finished, he nodded toward Beth. Keep it clean. Keep him still. He'll mend, long as he don't get foolish. She smiled faintly. That might be the hardest part. Elias shot her a look, but there was no real fire behind it. Reckon I've been told worse. Inside, the house smelled of coffee and smoke, the scent of survival. Beth helped him ease back into the chair by the hearth, laying a clean blanket over his lap. You should rest, she said softly. He grunted. I've done enough of that for a lifetime. Her eyes met his. You could have died, Elias. He sighed, his voice low and rough. Maybe. But you're the one who almost lost everything. Beth's hand found his, tentative but sure. For the first time, he didn't pull away. Later that week, the sheriff came out from town. He said Dyer was gone, arm torn up, reputation worse. The town, he said, didn't want more blood spilled. Elias only nodded, content to let the law have the last word for once. When the sheriff rode off, Beth joined him on the porch. The fields stretched wide before them, quiet again. She rested a hand on her belly, round and full beneath the soft morning light. You still planning to leave when the baby comes? He asked. Beth looked out across the land. I was, but I think this place found me for a reason. Elias studied her a long moment, then nodded. Peace don't come easy, but it's worth keeping once you got it. A month later, the first cry of new life filled the little house. Beth sat by the window, rocking the baby in her arms, while Elias worked outside carving a cradle from oak, the same wood as the Fields sign on the gate. When he brought it in, he set it beside her chair. It ain't perfect, he said. Beth smiled, tears glinting in her eyes. Neither are we. He chuckled softly, brushing his thumb across the baby's tiny hand. The town will take this as proof of their scandal, he said. She smiled back. Let them. This is our truth. This is home. Outside, the prairie wind carried the sweet scent of rain. Not a warning this time, but a promise. If this love story touched your heart, show some love back, like the video and subscribe for more. Tell me in the comments, should their love story continue or end with mystery?